When you start looking into how the hormones are acting, we need to look at target cell specificity. What that's referring to is each hormone has a particular receptor that it's targeting. Without that receptor, that hormone cannot bind. For example, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, that is only going to be able to bind to the adrenal cortex because that's the only place that the receptors are found. So that means you can find adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, from head to foot, but it can only exert its effect on the adrenal cortex because that's the only place that the receptors are found. So again, that's why it's important to know where the receptors are versus where the hormone is. The hormone can be everywhere, but it won't do anything unless it has its specific receptor. In contrast, thyroxine, or think thyroid hormone, it has receptors in pretty much every single cell in the body. Now, they're not really on the cell because they're internal. Remember, thyroid hormone is going to go inside, lipid-soluble. But those receptors are still there, which means that thyroxine, that thyroid hormone, is going to be able to interact with almost every cell of the body from head to foot. So it's all based on what specific receptor is located where. So the activation. Now, this is basically looking at activation. Blood levels of the hormone. So again, target cell activation. You have to have enough of the hormone in your blood to bind to enough of those receptors to cause an activation to occur. If there's not enough of the hormone in the blood, it can't bind to enough receptors, therefore it cannot cause activation. So blood levels of hormone are definitely important. Relative number of receptors, either on the surface or inside. Remember, water soluble have to be on the surface, lipid soluble have to be inside. If there are not enough receptors, so for example, the hormone binds to every receptor. If it always binds every receptor, that means its activity is always going. Well, maybe that particular tissue or cell needs to know is there higher or lower levels. So it's based on the number of receptors. It's also based on, again, combination of that blood level and receptor numbers. Think about ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. We just mentioned the receptors are only on the adrenal cortex. So let's say you secrete, and this are theoretical numbers, secrete 100 molecules of ACTH in your blood. You have 50 receptors on the adrenal cortex. Well, what are the odds of 50 out of those 100 ACTH molecules being at your adrenal gland? They can be in your blood from your head to your foot. So again, it's how the combination of the two work. And the third is the affinity of binding. What that means is sometimes the hormones, as they're going through the blood, have a stronger pull to certain receptors. If they don't have a strong enough affinity, those hormones might not be pulled towards the receptor, might simply pass on by and not bind. So these are the three key factors of target cell activation. So if you want to activate the proper cells, make sure you have enough hormone in the blood, make sure you have enough receptors to bind that hormone, and make sure there's a strong enough affinity to attract the hormone. So the three key pieces of target cell activation. Now there can be some modification here. Of those three, blood levels of hormone can be increased and decreased, so you have control over that. This upregulation and downregulation. You can increase the number of receptors, or you can decrease the number of receptors. So any particular tissue can create more receptors if it didn't have enough to bind the hormone. So we have this ability to modify, either upregulate more receptors or downregulate less receptors. Because if you have 50 receptors and you only ever bind 2 or 3, you don't need all the extras. So you can get rid of some and have fewer receptors. But that affinity stays constant through the whole process. So the affinity of the hormone to the receptor is a constant. So if we look at the hormones in the blood, now a lot of the hormones can simply float free, but some need a chaperone. They need something to help bind to. Steroid and thyroid hormones, the ones that are lipid soluble, they need to have these chaperones. They need to have something helping to bind them in the bloodstream. So they're actually attaching to these plasma proteins. The plasma proteins help them stay in the blood and travel throughout your bloodstream. Because think about it, your blood is mostly water. Lipids and water don't really go well together. So these plasma proteins help keep those lipids in the blood. But all the others, all the ones that are water soluble, all those amino acid based ones except thyroid, those simply just float free because they don't have a solubility issue in the blood. So again, how they're in the blood is based on their solubility, water or lipid soluble. Now the concentration of the hormones in your blood is based on these factors. 1, the speed of release or the rate of release. If there's a whole lot of the hormone being secreted right at once, you're going to have a higher amount of the hormone in the blood. But if your gland is only releasing a couple molecules at a time, that's going to have a lower concentration or a lower level of the hormone in your blood. Secondly, the speed of inactivation. Now, this inactivation can take on several different forms. We have degrading enzymes. These degrading enzymes simply do what they sound like. They break down the hormones. Because you don't want hormones simply be there forever. That means the signal is always going forever. So your body will break down the hormones at a certain steady rate with these enzymes. The kidneys, the liver, they're constantly filtering things out of your blood. Even the hormones, which you want to have there, they still can help clean them out and get rid of them. And then half-life. Now, any chemical in your body has a half-life. The amount of time it takes for half of those molecules to be broken down. Some hormones have a short half-life, some have a longer half-life. But it's the natural breakdown of the hormones as they're circulating through the blood. So all of these, from the degrading enzymes, the half-life, the liver, the kidneys, they're all constantly removing hormones from your blood. Which means if you're trying to maintain certain hormone levels, that means you must constantly be producing and secreting more hormone. So it's a constant balancing act to keep the hormones at the levels that your body wants while not getting them too high or too low. It's all about homeostasis. Now, how do they interact? How do these hormones interact with your tissues? There's 3 main ways they can interact. First is this permissiveness. In the case of permissiveness, one hormone needs a second hormone to be present to cause its action. Think of it as you have 2 keys to open up a door. The first one's there, can't do anything unless you have that second key that allows it to open up at the same time. So the idea of permissiveness. One hormone needs a second hormone to be present to cause its action. Synergism. Now, synergism is working together. In this case, more than one hormone produce the same effect. We saw something similar back in the nervous system. With acetylcholine, we know that nicotine had the same effect on those nicotinic receptors. Or muscarine had the same effect as acetylcholine on the muscarinic receptors. Two different things, same response. Same thing here. Synergism means you have two or more hormones now having the same effect on that gland. And antagonism. Antagonism, anti or opposite. In this case, one or more hormones will oppose the action of another. You can kind of think of it as almost blocking, preventing it from occurring. Permissiveness, synergism, and antagonism. The ways the hormones interact in a cell. Now, this is not the activation of a target cell. That was different. This is how they interact. So the three different ways that the hormones can interact together at a cell. So hormones, a lot of parts and pieces of how they're working and how they're causing their responses.